Let's get started. Is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
All right. So today we are officially starting with Microsoft Entra ID, which used to be formerly known as Azure Active Directory. And when it comes to Microsoft Entra ID, when it is about Microsoft Azure certifications, uh, so Azure certifications, there are certifications like AZ900, AZ104, AZ500, SC200, SC300. These are the certifications that has some mention of Microsoft Entra ID. I'm saying AZ900 basically talks about at a very high level that we have a directory service available in Microsoft Azure that organizations can leverage if they are cloud-born organizations or organizations which have their existing domain, existing uh, directory services in place. They can also synchronize their directory identities with Microsoft Entra ID for easy management of applications and workloads in Microsoft Azure. Then AZ104 is Azure Administrator Associate. AZ104 also talks about Microsoft Entra ID at a very high level, wherein it does involve some provisioning activities with respect to users and groups, with respect to assigning them Entra roles and Azure RBAC roles. Then comes AZ500. This is primarily for Azure Security Associate. This is a security certification from Microsoft Azure that was initially launched. And in this security certification, you also find a mention of Microsoft Entra. Then comes SC200, which is primarily for operations, that how do you manage operations in an Azure environment with respect to security. So this also deals with Microsoft Entra up to a certain extent, because when you deploy Microsoft Defender products or when you deploy Microsoft Sentinel, which constitutes 50 to 60% of part of this exam, you basically integrate it with Entra for authentication and authorization perspective. And you also stream Entra sign-in and audit logs into these solutions so that they can be evaluated and indicators of compromise, indicators of attack can be discovered, identified, and then further remediated by SOC team. Then comes SC300. SC300 entirely talks about Entra. It entirely talks about Entra, which is Microsoft Identity and Access Administrator Associate. So the focus of this week and the subsequent week is to learn Microsoft Entra service, try and cover every minute aspect of it wheresoever possible, do as much hands-on as possible. And at the same time, you would also need to make sure that you follow the instructions, you complete assignments that I will share with you from today onwards on Entra. There is a lot that we want to do. We will do approximately 30 plus labs in next 2 weeks. So you can imagine we have 15 days and 30 labs. So a minimum of 2 labs we will be doing every day in 4 hours. That includes theoretical aspects also. That includes questions from, questions and clarifications from participant also. So which basically means that there is a lot that we need to cover. If you are really interested in Entra, and if this is the opportunity that you have always been waiting for at your employer, then make sure that you leverage and you get benefit of this opportunity. You get the extreme benefit from this opportunity. So I already have identified those labs. They are official labs from Microsoft that we will be doing. And then we will also look at some additional aspects that is not part of Entra, which is more of a custom requirement that that basically was shared by your management, requesting me to cover whatever possible from that requirement. So that's the agenda for today, tomorrow, rest of the weeks, and rest of the training. Is everyone with me on this?
Yes, Raghuveer.
Great. Let's move on. So when I say SC300 exam, I did share this information on day one also. I will take another 2-3 minutes to repeat this information because this is where it is important today. So when it comes to SC300 exam or any exam of Microsoft, you will find Microsoft study guides for each exam. Exams are very dynamic. They typically, Microsoft change exam certification curriculum or syllabus twice a year, in January and then in July. Sometimes they change it more frequently. So if you look at SC300 exam, which is what is open on my screen, the curriculum was last updated on July 30th, right, which is a month and half ago. And as per the new curriculum, these are the domains that we are going to focus on, which is implement and manage user identities, implement authentication and access management, plan and implement workload identities, plan and automate identity governance. Now, coincidentally, some of the participants in batch 1 and batch 2 already have this certification. So they are not primarily focused on certification based knowledge. Their focus is to understand Microsoft Entra ID as a service, understand the configurations that we primarily do in a production environment. If the service provides you 100 capabilities, definitely in a production environment, you will not be using all of them. And it differs from customer to customer. But at the max, you will find 70 to 80% of those capabilities being used because the remaining 20% are not relevant to a business and to a business which is primarily a well-established business that you typically work with, your customers. You don't work with uh, new businesses. You don't work with entrepreneurs or somebody who has just started a new business, somebody who has absolutely no presence on when it comes to technology. Your employer is primarily working with large corporates with with hundreds of thousands or $1 million of billing. They are large enterprises across well-established industry verticals. That's what you primarily work with, or that's what I have known about your employer to the best of my knowledge, looking at the size, scale, and complexity. So these are the domains, and then these domains are further divided into subdomains. And in those subdomains, you have multiple topics also there. So these are this is the syllabus that we are primarily going to deal with, and we will try and cover this syllabus. Microsoft also has official SC300 labs. Those SC300 labs are simulated environments. So official SC300 guide. Let me put that guide into the transcript. Official SC300 labs. Now, this official 300 SC300 labs are simulated environment. When I said simulated environment, you don't really learn much from here. This is primarily for people who are new to technology, because in these labs, they will have a couple of services pre-configured. All you need to do is sign into the labs, follow the instructions on the left side of the screen. On the right side of the screen, you will have Microsoft Azure portal, which is also provided by the lab, wherein you will have a lot of restrictions with respect to you can't do anything as you wish. You will just need to follow the instructions and you will be able to complete the labs. This is something which I'm entirely against of. So what I typically do in my trainings, I use official labs just for the understanding purpose that what are my official labs, because the questions in the exam come from official labs. But to do the official lab, I give participants access to an Azure subscription to which they are account admin. So then other than doing that official lab, they can also practice a lot of things. Because when it comes to the exam, if you see that this exam has 4 domains, and in each domain there are further subdomains, at least 4 to 5 subdomains. So there is a lot which is there, but you will not find hands-on lab for each and everything, because at the end of the day, this is a business for Microsoft. Certification is a huge business. Microsoft makes a lot of money, in the name of certifications. And that is why Microsoft has made it compulsory for everyone to renew their certifications every year, to revalidate their knowledge on certifications every year, so that if you don't work with the same technology, if you don't renew it, and definitely if you don't work, then you may not be able to renew it, and then you lose your certification badge. And next time when you need to get it back, you need to pay the entire price. So that's so certification is more of a business for cloud service providers these days. That is why they have attached a price tag to the certification instead of having those certifications available as the lifetime of that technology, which used to be the case back in 2000. If you look at technology certifications, they would remain valid as long as the technology exists. So if you do a certification on Windows Server 2006, 2008 or 2012 R2, which is MCSC, or Windows Server Administration, or Windows Server Deployment and Configuration Certificate, that certification will remain valid as long as that technology continue to exist. Which means if Windows Server 2012 R2 continues to remain valid by Microsoft, Microsoft is providing patches for it, even if it is approaching end of life, your certification remains valid. It has no end date, no expiration date. But now certifications have expiration date. The maximum is 3 years, the minimum is 1 year. So focus of this training is not going to be certification based, because you already have certification, some of you, and those who doesn't have certification. Just let me know whenever you need to prepare for certification or you need to sit for certification. I'll send you dumps. I'll share exam dumps with you. 70 to 80% questions typically comes from the exam dumps itself, because they are official dumps, and you will be able to clear the certification. But then the question is, do you have equivalent knowledge? Will you be able to stand in front of the customer and defend your solution, or design and architect and solution based on the problem statement that customer is talking about? That's the key question that you need to ask yourself. And if you have the answer to that question as yes, then only tell people that you are SC300 certified. Otherwise, don't tell them, because the moment you tell somebody that you are SC300 certified, it raises the expectation. The expectation bar is very high for you. And when you fail and when you are not able to live up to that expectation, then it really, translates or reflects bad on your professional profile. So we need to be realistic to ourselves all the time. And that is where cloud is very dynamic, and you can't be realistic when you don't work with cloud services, more frequently. So that's all about SC300 and the agenda for the training that we will start from today. So we will use SC300 official labs. We will follow them. We will and do the hands-on in our own environment, so that you will struggle, so that you will scratch your head, so that you will use your brain to identify what is not working right here, so that this gives you an opportunity to learn more, rather working in a simulated environment where nothing fails. Everything works well, because if you don't do a previous step right, the next step will not work. So it automatically works fine without you knowing what exactly you are doing. You start the lab, you end the lab, and you really don't know yourself. Why did you do that? What did you achieve at the end of the day? So uh, that's where the strategy is to do everything in our own account. So for that, what we will do, we all will have, as we speak, and as we all participants have access to Microsoft Azure subscription with USD $100 credit approximately. This is now reduced up to certain dollars. valid till October 10th. I'm saying this is true in most of the cases, in most of your cases. So you already have access to a Microsoft Azure subscription, which is valid till October 10th, 2024. And this, and you are, and participants, and each participant is an account admin of this subscription. So when I say you are account admin, it basically means that you maintain the highest privilege on this subscription. Account admin basically means highest privilege in this subscription. And when I say highest privilege in the subscription, it and if you compare it with the role that is the highest privilege role in the subscription, it is the owner. So account admin maintains equivalent access to a subscription. Owner RBAC. RBAC stands for role-based access control. Guys, from today onwards, I will be talking about some terminologies which may be alien to some of you. If you ever feel, please let me know. Please ask questions, raise your hands. Do not interrupt my flow for sure. However, raise your hands. I would be able to see in the chat window. I'm saying on Microsoft Teams, I have participants a window opened on a separate screen. I'm using 3 screens as we speak. So I will always have it opened. I can always see who has raised hands, who has any questions, who is there in the session, who is leaving for some work, who is coming back. I will have clear visibility on all of it, right? So please make sure that you raise your hands whenever you have questions, rather interrupting the flow. So account admin maintains equivalent access to equivalent access. Admin maintains access equivalent to a subscription owner. Equivalent to a subscription owner RBAC. That's what account admin maintains. However, account admin has more privileges than a subscription owner. Why? Because you can add member users in your subscription and you can grant them subscription owner RBAC. Account admin and subscription owners can further subscription owners as well as user access admins, user access administrators. This is another role in Microsoft Azure, which is primarily created for security team who manages identity and access management service, so that without granting them any privileged access to Azure subscription, a specific access can be provided with which they can provide RBACs to member and guest users. That's user access administrator role. So account admins and subscription owners as well as user administrators can further add member or guest users, or you can say can further assign RBACs so they can further add and assign. You can say create. So they can further assign RBAC to a member or guest user identity in Azure. So these are some key pointers that I'm talking about, guys, and that will help you fill the gap in your knowledge, bridge the gap which you probably have in your knowledge with respect to the core concepts of Entra ID or core concepts of how it happens in real time, in a real production environment. So account admins and subscription owners as well as user access administration can further assign RBAC to a member guest user identity in Azure. And it's not guest user, it is also obviously guest. You don't have a group with the name guest, but you have member users and guest users, as well as groups. And when I say groups, it is both M365 groups as well as security groups. So they can assign access. Now, remember one thing, an owner is not equivalent to an account admin. However, account admin maintains all privileges of the owner. So a subscription owner role assigned to a user, member or guest user is not equivalent to an account admin role. Remember the statement, I'm making it bold because some people have this misconception. They think that subscription owner role assigned to a member guest user is equivalent to an account admin. No. Account admin is somebody who initiates a relationship with Microsoft, who signs up to Microsoft, who starts a relationship with Microsoft. So that account admin is the person who starts the relationship, who happens to have more privileges, more than a subscription owner, who have subscription owner privileges. And account admin also happens to be a global admin in Microsoft Entra ID. This is another thing. Account admin also happens to be a global admin in Microsoft Entra ID because you sign up with Microsoft Azure. The email address with which you sign up, that email address becomes account admin. And as part of sign up process, you are allocated a tenant of Microsoft Entra ID Directory service, an instance of that service, which is known as tenant. So you also become global admin in Microsoft Entra ID tenant, the tenant that has been granted to you. So account admin is also a global admin of the Microsoft Entra ID tenant. Now, this is something that a subscription owner doesn't have. Now, even if you grant, this is another thing that you need to remember, guys. Even a subscription owner, okay, even if a member is granted, member or guest user is granted global admin privileges, even though it does not maintain equivalent access to that of an account admin. This is another thing that you need to remember. So even if a member guest user is granted global admin privileges, you manually grant global admin role to a member user, it still does not maintain equivalent access to that of an account admin. I'm sharing the crux of the knowledge here. This is something that you take a couple of years quality time to acquire this knowledge. Now, why account as admin is so special? Why, when I'm providing subscription owner role, global admin role to a member or guest user, why that person is not becoming equivalent to an account admin? The reason is an account admin can further add more services. An account admin can further elevate the relationship or take it to the next level, which is enterprise admin. An account admin is also an enterprise admin. An account admin can further make more purchases. An account admin will always have some additional capabilities which a member or guest user Granted, RBAC as subscription owner or Entra role as global admin would not enjoy. And when it comes to the service configuration also, you cannot use main account admin role for service configuration. You will always need to provide a member guest user, typically member, not guest user, a member user member user global admin role for service configuration. When we configure synchronization of on-premises identities with Microsoft Entra, then you will see the statement. You will realize that it is asking for a global admin role for authentication. However, when you provide account admin credentials, it doesn't accept it. It asks you for a global admin role. And you see, and you know that my account admin is a global admin. You can validate them from Microsoft Entra that yes, my account admin is a global admin. But even though it will not accept it, it will say, please provide a valid global admin role. Why it is doing so, and it doesn't explain you. That's where the gap in the documentation, gap in the theory is. That is something that I'm trying to fill here in this training with my years of experience working with this technology, that they don't specifically tell you, you need to figure out which account admin this tool is asking for, because this tool doesn't give me that information. So the tool basically looks for a member user that has been elevated as global admin to provide the configuration or to set up the synchronization. Similarly, when you configure conditional access, there will be instances wherein you will need a specific account admin for certain use cases. When you configure identities, when you configure permission managements, when you configure Entra internet access, or when you configure identity governance, you will see that in what scenario I'm using the actual account admin role, and in what scenario I'm using a member user who has been elevated by account admin as equivalent to a global admin or subscription owner that I'm using. So you will see that in the subsequent exercises that we will do. So right now we can conclude the topic as that the person who signs up with Microsoft Azure becomes an account admin would always manage highest privileges on Microsoft Azure and Entra tenant as part of that relationship, which member users granted similar access will not, will not manage those or will not have those privileges. Is everyone with me on this? Okay, now we will start with the basic configuration that is primarily needed. So to begin with, we need two things. A, we need to understand the licensing in Microsoft Entra ID. Second, we need to acquire, I can say purchase or subscribe to appropriate license to do Entra ID related configuration. That's what we need to do. And then you also need to understand the basics of Entra ID, which definitely I will cover in this training. I did share the recorded session URL of my channel where I have got some Entra related videos. They have mention of Azure Active Directory because those videos are a bit old. However, the configuration and core concepts remains the same. Core concepts have not changed. It will continue to remain the same. Active Directory remains Active Directory, whether it is Active Directory that used to come in server 2000 or Active Directory that you today see in server 2012, 2022. The difference is there in the capabilities. That in 2000, in the year 2000, you did not have many capabilities. Today you have more capabilities because capabilities are introduced with the change in technology. So when technology changes, when new use cases and problem statements are discovered, then the technology evolves. So the core concepts remains the same. Even today, if somebody is from Active Directory background in this training, what you used to know about Active Directory service 15 years ago, it is still the same Active Directory concept. Or did it change? Sundareshan, Shiv Prasad, did you feel that Active Directory core concepts have changed or it still remains the same?
No, it's still the same. The domain knowledge and all the concepts still remain the same. Maybe the features
Absolutely.
might have been added, but the core concepts remain the same.
Core concepts remains the same. So it is still the DNS and DHCP service. It is still Active Directory users and computers. The UI continues to remain the same. The color combinations, the way they present it probably have changed, but the core concepts remain the same. And that is where it is important to have strong basics, strong foundation, so that even if you are 20 years old professional, you don't have a gap in your knowledge. And when you work at a role, you satisfy that role. You define or you justify that position. So when you work as an Active Directory architect, you justify that position. You should not have gap in your knowledge, because nobody becomes an architect just by doing a certification or just by going through that service and probably doing some hands-on projects in 1 year or 2 year. No, you don't deserve to be an architect. To become an architect, you need to have all-round knowledge of multiple technologies. You need to have worked with complex projects, complex use cases, delivered on those expectations. You need to have identified new use cases, new problem statements. That is where you qualify to call yourself as an architect. Otherwise, designation has nothing to do. Some people by designation may have architect, but it hardly makes any difference, right? Somebody becomes a program manager within a couple of years. I don't consider that person as a program manager, because that person has not seen the way at the dark side of program management. That person has only have seen the bright side of it, wherein there had absolutely been no issues in the projects that he or she has managed. Okay, so basics are very important. Experience is very important. Okay, so this is what we are going to do. We are going to acquire license for Microsoft Entra ID. Before we acquire license, we will look at licensing part, and then we will acquire. Obviously, we are not going to purchase. I don't want you to make, pay anything. So, and we will definitely subscribe. So what we will do, all participants, will subscribe to Microsoft Entra Premium P2 trial license in their respective Azure account. So you will all subscribe to Microsoft Entra ID Premium P2 trial license. Why are we taking Premium P2 trial license? Because this is the highest or topmost license in Microsoft Entra that will allow us to go through all the theoretical aspects of the exam as well as hands-on lab. There will be some additional licenses that we will also take eventually as and when needed, but we will start with this. So let's understand licensing in Microsoft Entra ID. So this is the page that contains the licensing information. I'll add this to the document, as well as I'll put that into the chat window. I want you all to open this page. on your respective system. Is everyone done? Is it opened? Okay. So you can see when Microsoft in October last year officially renamed or completed this transition of renaming Azure Active Directory with Microsoft Entra ID. And that transition is not 100% complete even today, because in some of the references, you will still find a reference of Azure Active Directory or previous nomenclature you will still find that you will see in this training also, as and when we proceed further with those services. So if you look at the licensing part, there used to be 3 licenses at that point in time. We had free license, Microsoft Entra free license. We had Microsoft Entra license for Microsoft 365 services. We had Microsoft Premium P1 and Premium P2 license. There used to be 4 licenses for Microsoft, Azure Active Directory. When they renamed it to Microsoft Entra, they added some additional capabilities, and they also created some additional license offerings to attract a specific customer who probably have existing investments into a similar IAM product, and the customer is looking for a specific capability which is missing in that product and solution. So that customer doesn't have to pay more money for a redundant capabilities that customer may not use. So let's understand Microsoft Entra Suite license details. So we have Microsoft Entra ID and Microsoft Entra Suite. And when it comes to the license, we have, I'd say, first of all, we have a free license that we all of us have. For example, if I navigate to my Microsoft Entra, I'm saying if you all navigate to your Microsoft Entra, uh, log into your Azure subscription, navigate to Entra ID, and then over here under license, you will find free. It will say Microsoft Entra free license. In my case, it says P2 because, as I said, I did a POC for one of the use case wherein it required a P2 license. So I already acquired it. I already took a trial of it. But in your case, it will say free license. Can you double check and confirm whether it says free or anything else here on the screen?
It says Microsoft Entra ID free.
Right? Microsoft Entra ID free license. So if I go back to the documentation, that free part is missing here. Earlier, Microsoft would show that what does free license contain, what all capabilities are there in the free license. Now, probably Microsoft doesn't want to add that part because Microsoft is trying to encourage or kind of position the paid products and want to encourage you to purchase the paid license. That is why they are not showing what does the free license contains. Okay, so let's understand the paid license one. The first license category is Microsoft Entra ID P1. P1 stands for, I'm saying it's like Premium P1. It says Microsoft Entra ID, formerly Azure Active Directory P1, is available as a standalone or included with Microsoft 365 E3. So if you happen to be an existing Microsoft 365 customer, then 365 have licenses like E3 and E5, and there are other licenses also. So if you happen to have Microsoft 365 E3 license, which provides your employees Microsoft email services, which is Outlook, a mailbox, Microsoft Office services, and some additional services like Microsoft Teams, then you already have my equivalent of P1. You don't need to purchase a separate P1. It is for enterprise customers and Microsoft 365 Business Premium for small to medium businesses. So you have one premium I say P1 plan, they don't use premium word now. They just say Microsoft Entra ID P1. Then you have P2 plan. Let's compare the capabilities in P1 and P2 plan. And then you have Microsoft Entra Suite plan also. Now look carefully. It says $6 per user per month. What does that mean? It basically means that these licenses are user based. Whether it's a member user or a guest user, it is user based license. So if you have 1,000 users in your company, and if you want the same level of privileges to be granted to all the users, or same level of management from identity management perspective, you will need to grant them P1 license. So you procure P1 license and then you manually assign them to users and security groups, right? So P1 license, P2 license, and suite. So this suite is something that they have crafted separately. It used to be P1 and P2 only. And P1 and P2 would contain all the capabilities, right? So they have removed Microsoft 365 license. They have removed Microsoft Entra free license capabilities. Now let's understand the capabilities. So these are, we can expand them, expand all, let's say. Now under Microsoft Entra ID, you see a couple of capabilities that we will go through, which is conditional access, role-based access control. You can see all of these capabilities are available here. However, you don't see that capability available in Microsoft Entra Suite, right? So I'll explain the difference later on. So right now you can see that all Microsoft related capabilities, which is conditional access, role-based control, SharePoint limited access, global password protection management, this is included, advanced security and usage report. All of these capabilities are available in both the license. However, the moment you go to Entra ID protection, it requires a premium P2 license, a P2 license, because these capabilities are not available in P1, which are conditional access is there in P1. However, it is like 50% of the capabilities. If you need the remaining 50%, you need P2 license, which provides risk-based conditional access, real-time dynamic sign-in assignments, which provides you additional capabilities, right? Device and application filter. Similarly, if you look at governance capabilities, as part of P1, you have access to certain governance capabilities, which is automated user provisioning to software as a service apps. So some capabilities and couple of capabilities are missing. For example, entitlement management is missing in P1. Lifecycle workflows, identity governance dashboard, nothing is available in P1 license. In fact, access to Microsoft Azure Logic Apps is not there. Something that we need to do. Privileged identity management, a critical functionality, is missing here. Under verified ID, which is a new capability that they have added, you can see that all the capabilities, both the capabilities, which is verifiable credentials and verifiable credentials issuance and verification is available. However, rest of the two capabilities are part of Entra Suite. Under internet access, nothing will be available because it is specifically for Entra Suite. Entra private access specifically for Entra Suite, right? So you can see here. Now let's talk about Entra Suite. So Entra Suite combines network access, which is internet access, identity protection, which is more on the governance side capabilities, and identity verification solutions. A subscription to Microsoft Entra P1 or a package that includes Microsoft Entra P1 is required. Special pricing is available for Microsoft Entra P2 and Microsoft 365 E5 customers. Now, Microsoft is trying to do the damage control here. See, imagine a customer who has already been paying $9 per user per month. If you ask that customer to pay additional 12 users for the same user accounts, the customer would definitely become irate and say, what are you doing? I'm saying 12 plus 9 is $21. You're charging me $21 to manage one user account, to secure that user. I would rather go with a third-party solution like SailPoint, Savient, ForgeRock, CyberArk, and probably use a combination of solutions, and I would not even pay that. So that is where Microsoft says that, okay, I can get you Entra Suite license because these are the new capabilities that I launched when I introduced Microsoft Entra last year. Microsoft Entra Internet Access, Microsoft Entra Private Access. These are the new capabilities that I launched, right? So these new capabilities are not available. And in the verified ID also, I've added some additional capabilities. So these new capabilities, they are not available in the premium P1 and P2. However, if you are ready to go for Entra Suite, I can definitely get you some discounted pricing, which is written here, a subscription to Microsoft Entra ID P1. I'm saying in order to get Entra Suite license, you cannot directly get this license and say, okay, give me Entra Suite license. I am more interested in taking these capabilities, which is Internet Access and Entra Private Access. No, Microsoft would say, no, that's not possible. You will need to have a minimum of P1 license so that identities to whom you want to grant internet access and private access, I would have visibility on those identities. I would have basic security configuration done on those identities. So that's what it says, that if you need Entra Suite license, a subscription to Microsoft Entra ID P1 or a package that includes P1 is required for this license, and special pricing is available for Microsoft Entra P2 and Microsoft 365 E5 customers. Now P2 and 365 E5 is one and the same thing. The cost remains the same. I would say E5 is much more costlier, but then with E5 you get Microsoft 365 services. And with those services, because those services require security compliance, that is why equivalent of Entra P2 capabilities are available in E5 license. So these are my three license categories that I have. And then what Microsoft is doing, I just noticed that they have just added one small box so that you kind of overlook it, stating that Microsoft Entra Free is included with Microsoft Cloud subscription, such as Microsoft Azure, Microsoft 365. And this license will support some basic capabilities, which is it will support multi-factor authentication, unlimited SSO across any SaaS app. It will support basic reports, self-service password reset, SSPR, for cloud users only. See, this is how they are putting the conditions. Manage users and group in the cloud, you will be able to do, and you will be able to sync your on-premises directory, LDAP, with Microsoft Entra ID with free license. That's what you will be able to do. So this is about licensing part that you need to be aware of. Then comes some standalone products. This is like creating varieties, multiple SKUs of a product. So you have Microsoft Entra Suite standalone products also. These are standalone. Let's see, you only need internet access capabilities. See, if you need Microsoft Entra Suite, then you need P1 license at least. However, if you go for standalone product, only this product, then you can go for Entra Internet Access and Entra Private Access. Why? Because Internet Access and Private Access capability was added with Microsoft Entra ID only. It was not available with Azure Active Directory, and even if it was available, then very limited capability of it existing in the existing capabilities. So some standalone licenses are there, and you have governance license also, standalone license, verified ID license is also there. So you have some standalone licenses also available for Microsoft Entra products. And then you have some additional Entra products also available, which is external ID management, Entra permissions management, Entra workload identities, and Entra domain services. So these are some additional products which are also available here. So now Microsoft Entra plans are more, I would say, distributed and extensive in nature. Earlier, a customer would end up paying more than what he or she was actually consuming. Today, it is not the scenario. Microsoft has evolved the licensing and plans. It may not be good for existing customers because now they end up paying more. But for new customers, this is a good opportunity to pick and choose the service that they need and accordingly pay for it. So these are all licenses. We will do a couple of capabilities, and as and when for that capability we need a license, we can quickly get a trial for it. Is everyone with me so far? Any questions on the licensing part?
No. Yeah,
All
good.
right, let's move on. So this is on the licensing part. Now the next part is that you procure this license, because for capabilities that we need to do, we need a license. Either we take it today or we will have to take it tomorrow. Basic, you've seen that basic user and group management is already part of the free license. Sync your on-premises directory with Microsoft Entra ID. This part is free. And this is something that we will start with before we get into the advanced topics in Entra. We will start with the very basics of putting together a use case that we all are enterprise admins, or we are the highest admins of our enterprise, and we maintain an on-premises presence. Now we want to create hybrid identities. So we'll start with this. Then we will move on to this, right? And then we will look at these capabilities also. But after that, when we start with capabilities like conditional access, risk-based conditional access, entitlement management, privileged identity management, for those capabilities, we would need a premium P2 license. So I will let you know when we need to go for the license and how do we need to procure license or take license, because Microsoft has recently changed that option also. When I procured license, the story was different at the beginning of this month. When I tried over the last week, the story is different now. So it requires a different steps or some additional information from user to provide license. I would like you to give it a read. So our first topic is, I would say, other than the licensing, when we basically start, the first thing that we need to do is to understand the basic concepts that you need to be aware of. And here it is. So I'll share the basic concepts.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, let's get started. So let's talk about identity fundamentals real quick. We'll not spend much time here, but I want everyone on the same page here, so that there are some participants who are new to Entra, some participants who have been working with Entra for a couple of weeks, and some participants who have not at all worked with Entra. So we'll talk about some identity fundamentals here. Now, when it comes to identity, as I said, it all started with InfoSec. Information security. Information security evolved into cybersecurity, and cybersecurity further with the advent of, or with the introduction of cloud computing, became cloud security. So cloud security is a subset of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a subset of information security. So at the end of the day, it is information security that we all do, because you don't secure clouds. If you just give it a thought, at the end of the day, what exactly are you securing? You are securing data and information, because that's what is most critical to you. Your application is nothing but an information. Your identities, your employees are nothing but some information which is there in the cloud. Information with respect to their name, their email address, their personal identifiable information. Application is nothing but a piece of code. Code is what? It's a data which has some meaning. That's the reason we call it application code. So at the end of the day, we all are securing information. So it's information security domain that we are all part of, whether you call yourself a cybersecurity professional or cloud security professional. It is information security that we all do. Now, when it comes to information security, there are multiple domains of information security. When I say domains, we know as control domains. In fact, if you look at Cloud Security Alliance, in short CSA, which is a non-profit body heavily invested into the security of cloud, they have released their they have released a cloud control matrix, in short CCM. And cloud control matrix is nothing but a spreadsheet or a document that lists best practices for cloud computing configurations, for configuring clouds for a large enterprise, complex configuration. And it also has multiple domains. So it has approximately 18 domains, and those 18 domains are related to information security. So one of the domain in security, whether you call it cloud security, cyber security, information security, and similar to CSA, there are multiple bodies. You have NIST, NIST, you have uh, CIS, which is Center for Internet Security, CIS. They also provide benchmarks. Similarly, Gartner, Forrester, Sense, they all provide best practices. Cloud security best practices. And there are more bodies. I'm saying they are not all. There are bodies like EC Council, ISACA, Identity Management Institute. There are multiple bodies which are invested heavily into cloud security, and they basically provide controls, best practices, configurations for cloud security. So one of the domain which all of these bodies are on the same page is identity and access management. And when it comes to identity and access management, what is this domain? What exactly we do in this domain? So identity and access management is one of these cybersecurity, cloud security, or information security domains. It deals with, I'm saying this domain deals with this domain deals with provisioning and management of identities and their access to various services, resources in the system or network. This is how we can define identity and access management domain in one sentence, that this domain deals with provisioning and management of identities and their access to various services and resources in the system or network. That's what this domain is. So we are talking about two things here. One is identity and the other is access management. Now, when it comes to identity and access management, we need to understand what are they. So what is an identity? First of all, what is an identity and what is access management here? I'm saying if you want to understand a complex technology, break it into multiple pieces and then try and understand it, because you won't be able to consume it or understand it, in one piece. So identity basically means, as you have already seen in the documentation, it says a digital identity or an identity is a collection of unique identifiers or attributes that represents a human, software, machine, resource, or a computer system, or resource in a computer or network system. So that's what an identity is. I'll directly take it from the documentation. So identity is a collection of unique identifiers. Identifiers basically means an email address, sign-in credential, bank account number, phone number, anything. So that's an identity, right? Now, when I say that this is an identity, what are my different types of identities? When specific to cloud, my type of identity. So we have two types of identities, human and non-human identities. Now, if you want to differentiate between human and non-human identities, give me a minute here. And I'll share a documentation from ISC2, wherein they have created a distributed documentation. I'm just looking for it if I can find it. Otherwise, I'll share it later on. That basically talks about in detail different identities and access management concepts. Okay, so I will probably find it later on. Let's talk about here. All right. So identity is of two types. It is either a human identity or non-human identity. Now, can somebody define what is a human identity here? What all examples could be for a human identity? Monisha. Examples of human identity.
Fingerprint, Face ID.
Okay, so basically you're getting into the detail. When I say human identity, who do I refer to basically in an organization? So human identity, basically my employees, my users, my customers, my vendors, my partners, they are my human identities because I basically manage them. I manage their access in the system, right? So they are my human identities. What would be an example of non-human identities?
Devices, applications.
Absolutely. Devices. And when I say devices, they are laptop, desktop, servers, mobile, PDA, iPad, and non-human identities are also your service accounts. And in cloud, we have a concept of managed identities. They are the examples of non-human identities, right? So human identities and non-human identities. When I say that identity and access management is a domain that deals with provisioning and management of identities, it basically means that it deals with both human and non-human identities. As an identity admin, you manage both human identities as well as non-human identities. Don't just feel that you only manage human identities. You also manage non-human identities, right? So that's about identity. Let's talk about access management now. Now, what is access management piece here? We talked about identity. What is access management? How can you define access management in just one sentence? Anybody, give it a try.
Maintaining or controlling what an identity can access or how an identity can access resources.
Okay. Any other participant? Let's close. Monisha, Shiva, Siddharth, Vaibhav. What do you mean by access management?
Authentication.
Authentication. Yep. Authorization is also access management. Okay. So when I say access management is a process or methodology. It's a process or methodology of granting access. When I say access, who I'm granting access to? System or resources. So it's a process or methodology of granting access to whom? Identities. That's what access management is. And that's exactly what I've written in the definition, that identity and access management deals with provisioning and management of identities and their access. So there refers to identities basically. Their access to various systems and resources or various services and resources in the system and network. So it's a process and methodology of granting access to identities. Now, when I say granting access to identities, definitely I will have some best practices in mind. While I grant access to an identity, what are my best practices? Or how should I be granting access, right? So those best practices are the access must be time bound. When I say time bound, it means that it should not last forever. That's what I expect, right? Shiva, what could be other expectations or what could be other best practices?
So I think it's a overall I am the least privilege.
Absolutely. Least privilege. The access must be least, it must have least privileges. So when I say least privileges, it says lowest privileges possible to deliver somebody's job roles and functions. Lowest privilege which is possible that you can think of needed for an employee to deliver his or her job role and functions. That's least privilege, right? What else? Monisha, you already part of Entra team now. When you grant access to somebody, what else comes to your mind as a best practice that you will and must follow? Anything else that comes to your mind? So we talked about it has to be time bound. It should not last forever. You should not grant an access. You should not grant somebody privileged access forever. It's against the principle. Least privilege. What else? Next is separation of duty. We read it with principle of least privilege. Separation of duty. Separation of duty basically says that access must be granted based on the duty of the identities. Now, job role and function and duties, there is a thin line between them. Least privilege and separation of duty is read together. It's like two terms in law, which says read together. So your access must always be granted based on principle of least privilege and separation of duty. If there are two individuals who do the same thing, they both are administrators, but I'm sure their duties are different. Their duties cannot be the same, right? So if their duties are different, then access must be granted based on the duties of the identity. And other thing that we need to follow is which is known as PIM PAM. So I'll write it separately. PIM access must be governed using PIM PAM. PIM is privileged identity management, and PAM is privileged access management. Is everyone with me so far?
Yes, Raghu.
Yes, Raghu.
Okay. So that's identity and access management part. Next, now we will do privileged identity management and privileged access management, or we will see how Entra does it. How Entra provides privileged access management and privileged identity management. But before we get in there, do I have any participant who actually knows the difference between PIM PAM? With an example, I want to understand. And you can take an example in Microsoft Azure. You have done with core services. You've done a lot of work in core services. You've provisioned virtual machines, you've provisioned disk, you've provisioned network, storage accounts, and whatnot. Think from that perspective and take an example and tell me what is privileged, how I'm using both PIM PAM while I work as an admin or as a team member, L1, L2 team member, where exactly PIM PAM comes into the picture. Otherwise, you will never understand the difference. You will just say, okay, PIM is a service in Entra ID and CyberArk is a PAM solution. That's all you will always know, which is not the right answer. Okay.
So
The
PIM
example
grant the
is, yeah,
yeah.
yes, Manish.
PIM grant the access of the user and PAM control and man monitor it.
PIM grants access and PAM monitors it. So PAM
Monitor
is a
and control.
monitoring
Yeah.
software then.
Request access on control monitor.
Okay. So let's understand with an example. Okay. The example is that there is a service request, and service request says attach an additional 128 GB of standard SSD managed disk to a virtual machine. And then you have that virtual machine name, let's say US East. I'm just providing a production request. So production request will have production nomenclature. So there's a virtual machine with the name US East Prod, DYN Dynamics App 1. That's the virtual machine name. So this is the service request that comes to you. Okay. Now you're supposed to work on this service request. And let's say Monisha receives this service request. And Monisha needs to work on it. So this service request has two portions. One is attach an additional 128 GB of standard SSD managed disk to a virtual machine. So Monisha needs to perform some operations in Azure portal, which is she will primarily log into Azure portal. Give me a moment, guys. I lost my access, so I need to log in again. Right. So in order to complete this request, Monisha, she will basically sign into Microsoft Azure, a subscription of the customer from where the request has come. She will navigate to the virtual machines tab. And let's say this is the virtual machine. So she will click on that virtual machine, navigate to that virtual machine. From there, she will navigate to disk. And then here, there is an option to create and attach a new disk. So she will click on this option. Now she needs to create and attach a new disk. This is an administrative work, and this work requires elevated access. And since customer for whom Monisha works, that customer follows PIM PAM. So customer has PIM service in place, which is privileged identity management. And by default, customer has given reader access to all the users, read-only access. And whenever a user needs to perform an administrative work, any change in the environment, change in the configuration of a service, user needs to navigate to PIM service, look for an appropriate RBAC, which is needed to perform that action, select that RBAC and elevate the access. That request goes to the admin approves it, and then user can perform that activity. So the first part, which is creating and attaching, I'm saying you will first create and then attach, create and attach an additional 128 GB of SSD from Azure portal on this virtual machine will require elevated access, which is virtual machine contributor access. And with that access, she will be able to perform the create and attach part. So this part is privileged identity management. Through PIM solutions, she will be granted administrative access and she will perform this activity. Now, after this activity is complete, after this disk is attached to the VM, in the VM console, the disk will not be shown. Inside the VM, it will not show. So for example, I will create and attach a disk. So I will attach a disk, let's say data disk, and I will just, to keep the cost low, I will attach a standard SSD of 30 GB to this VM. I will say apply. Okay, so I've selected standard SSD 32 GB. And before I do that, definitely my access level should be of virtual machine contributor level. So that I basically elevated through PIM, right? So what I did, I basically went to this PIM service as a user. And on this service under manage, under task, I had this option, which is my roles. I clicked on my roles. Then I clicked on Azure resources. Here I saw that virtual machine contributor role. I selected that role and I elevated it and I'm approved. Once I'm approved, I'll navigate to the virtual machine. This is the virtual machine. Navigate to the disk. Click on create and attach a new disk. Provide the disk name as data disk. Select the disk performance, standard SSD, and I will click on apply. So what it will do, it will create a disk of 32 GB with standard SSD performance, which is created now, and then it will attach that disk to the VM. That's what it is doing. Now this request is complete. However, if I log into the VM, I will not find that disk. So my VM is stopped. I'll just start it. This has been updating. Okay, so now the next part of this request is that the disk must be visible inside the VM, right? And for that, I will need to navigate to disk management under control panel and initiate and initialize this disk and then create a volume from this 32 GB of disk so that when I complete this request, resolve it as, when I close this request as resolved, when it goes to the user, the actual requester will be able to see that space, 32 GB of space as D drive, E drive, whatever volume you create, and requester should be able to store data into that space, right? That's exactly what you need here. So in order to log into this VM, I would need what? Administrative access. Because if I want to make any changes into the control panel disk management without administrative access, I won't be able to do that. So Monisha, as second part of this request, she will need privileged access now. She will need admin access to the virtual machine so that she can log into it as an administrator. She can navigate to control panel, disk management, look for that disk which is showing as offline, bring it online, initialize it, create a volume from it, and complete the request. That's the example of PIM PAM. So first PIM came into the picture, second PAM came into the picture. Now for PAM, we can use solutions. CyberArk is one of the leader when it comes to PAM. You have other solutions also. The Inqua is another solution that we use, but CyberArk is a leader. There are multiple solutions that we use for PAM. Now, what will be configured in CyberArk? In CyberArk, this virtual machine will be added. This virtual machine is known as system or service. This machine will be added, and the login credentials of this machine will be added in CyberArk. And Monisha will be created as a user in CyberArk, and she will be assigned access to this machine. So when Monisha needs to log into this machine, she will navigate to CyberArk, search for this resource, double click on it, and she will directly log in. CyberArk will not expose login credentials to Monisha. That is what privileged access management. So any privileged system, any privileged account then that you want to manage, that you want to secure, you will use privileged access management services. Now, what is privileged access management service in case of, if you compare it with Entra, if you compare it in Azure, what is my Azure specific privileged management service? How do I manage access in Azure? Which service in Azure do you think is equivalent to, see, for privileged identity management, you already know that in Azure world, Microsoft Entra PIM capability is the answer. But when it comes to PAM, what do you think is the service in Azure that we use for it? Or equivalent or very near to what CyberArk or these solutions are doing, or I've just explained? In which service you manage users access? Guys, it's not that difficult. It's Entra once again. It's either Entra domain service or Active Directory domain service, which is integrated with Entra. Because in those services we manage, if I want a user to be granted access to a device or to a system, that device is joined to Entra domain or Active Directory domain, right? So I can directly go to the device in the devices and I can grant access to any user. Or as an admin, domain admin, I can log into that device, and inside that device, if that device is not domain joined, then I can log in using a local admin user, which is, and after that I can navigate to lusr.mgr.msc. I mean, it's a local user and group management, and I can grant anybody access to that system, admin access, or if it's a server, or remote desktop user access. So that's what we do in Azure. So in Azure, PAM is managed using Entra domain service or Active Directory domain service that we use, and PIM is managed through Microsoft Entra capability, which is known as PIM. Is everyone with me on this? These are all basics, fundamentals, because when I move into the configuration, I would not be repeating them, or I would expect them you to know this. Otherwise, you will not understand a couple of things. Is everyone with me on this?
Yes, Raghu.
Any questions so far? Okay, next. Another thing that you need to aware of. Can somebody tell me the difference between a user identity or a service account identity? So we have user account versus service account or managed identity. This is another concept in cloud. Service account is an on-premises concept. You probably are very much aware of it. However, managed identity is specific to cloud, which is equivalent to service account. We also call them service principal. Okay, be my guest, guys. Define the difference between user account and service account. You will be dealing with this in Entra a lot.
Service account is a single account which helps us to log in into this on premises. I mean, connect with the on premises.
Connect with on premises. Okay. Any other example, guys? Service account. I'm sure you manage a couple of service accounts. Yeah.
Service account is something which has different password policy, like unlike user accounts. Firstly, like user accounts
Okay.
generally has a timeline, like it gets like password might get expire, but service accounts also the option can be put, but generally we do not use it, and it can be managed by like multiple people for implementation or integration part. Um, and and user accounts are related to can be used by like one user, which has which uh, on which the access can be granted like to some set of like by adding user accounts to some groups or providing any file share access or something. We can grant the same access to service accounts as well, but service account is mainly used for that implementation integration part, but the user accounts are not used for that.
Okay, great. Yep. You were quite close to it, and you did really explain the real-time implementation or the features and characteristics of user account versus service account. Yep. Okay. So let's understand. So as Vedant has rightly said, user account is for one user, right? So it has one-to-one relationship. You cannot grant the same user account to two users. I'm saying it cannot happen that Monisha and Anusha, they are using the same user credentials. They are using the same mailbox, same email address. It cannot happen. It's one-to-one relationship. But service account is one-to-many. The same service account can be used across multiple applications, multiple integrations. The second thing that Vedant has talked about is password policy. Service account typically is configured with password to not expire. Why? Because we are using it for multiple integrations. If the password expires, you don't know what will fail, how much of impact you will have. But user account is configured with password policy, wherein the user must change his or her password once in 60, 90, 120 days, depending on organization to organization, that what their password policies are. So those are the two things that Vedant has explained, which is very right. So let's understand user account versus service account. So the first thing, user account has one-to-one mapping. When I say one-to-one mapping, one person, one user account. User account is basically granted to a human identity. Remember, user account is always granted to a human identity. We talked about human and non-human identities. So user account is granted to a human identity. It has one-to-one mapping. One human, one user, one's user account, right? Then the other thing that you need to remember is it is governed by a password policy, right? So assigned to human identity, governed by password policy, and user account will have varying level of access or permissions. I'm saying if there are 10 user accounts, they will not have the same level of access and permission. Depending on who those users are, the permissions will be separate, varying level of permissions. Some will be L1, some will be L2, some will be L3, some will be L4 or subject matter experts. So varying level of permissions will be there. Other thing, user account will be permanent. When I say permanent, it basically means as long as you are part of that system, you are an employee of a company, your user account will continue to remain the same. Have you seen any incident at your employer where user account keeps changing for an individual after every year on each anniversary? or every time that employee moves from one business unit to another, the user credentials, emails, and other things changes for that individual? Yes, no, maybe?
No, Raghuveer.
Right? It never changes. And we use user account to provide access to services and resources. That's what we use, user account. We use user account to provide access to service and resources. That's user account for you. That's how you can define a user account. Let's talk about service account now. So service account, service principal, or managed identities. What do we use them for? So they have just same comparison. They have one-to-many mappings. I can create one service account and I can grant it admin credentials, and then I can use that service account in my applications. Like one service account that has admin access to databases, to a database. Now, multiple applications use the same database. So in the connection string of the database, I would put that service account so that it can authenticate and authorize to database. So we use service account. So it has one-to-many mappings. One service account can be mapped to multiple systems and applications, one-to-many mappings, right? Second thing, it is assigned to an application or a resource. It is not assigned to an individual employee. You don't assign a service account to an employee, right? It is assigned to an application or a resource. Service account password never expires. I'm talking about in 99% of the companies, they will never ever have a service account configured with password policy. Its password never expires. It is configured with password policy, which basically means the password strength of the service account will align with password policy, like 15 characters, uppercase, lowercase, and whatnot. But its password never expires. Service accounts have admin credentials. In 99% of the cases, they come with admin credentials. So they have you can say have privileged or admin access, admin credentials or access. That's what service account has. What else? Governed by password policy, varying level of access permission. They have privileged permissions. They are permanent. User accounts are permanent. Service accounts are temporary. Let's say you create a service account today for the purpose of granting administrative access to an application so that it can communicate with the database. And then in future, you probably stop using that application. So you will delete that service account. It's temporary. I cannot define the time frame. Temporary. I say it could be for a month, for a year, for 10 years, but it's temporary. It's not permanent. It has temporary credentials. You can say temporary credentials. What else? What do we use it for? We have said one-to-many mappings assigned to an application resource. What do we use it for? Users use it for accessing services and resources. This is used for service to service communication. When two services wants to communicate, they use service accounts. Let's say there is a virtual machine in Azure and you want that virtual machine to communicate with with storage account service. Then you will use a service account. There is an application that wants to communicate with the database. You will use a service account for the communication, which is nothing but authentication and authorization. So that's what we use a service account for, or that's what defines a service account. Is everyone on the same page now? Any questions so far? Okay, Let's move on. Then comes the basic, we are talking about identity and access management. And then I also talked about identity fundamentals. So what else did you read in identity fundamentals there on that documentation? So you talked about identities, human identities, workload identities, defined identities. It basically talks about 3 identities. Why it is talking about 3 identities? Because this is Microsoft Azure documentation. They have a concept of workload identities. And I only talked about in general. So your workload identities is equal to your managed identity or service principal here. Okay. Then comes authentication. Now, when it comes to authentication, so we have 2 concepts, authentication and authorization. What is authentication? What is authorization? When you sign into Microsoft Azure, when I type portal.azure.com, since I'm already signed into this browser, it will automatically sign me in. But however, let's say I type as a user, I type portal.azure.com here. I'm trying to sign into Microsoft Azure portal. The first thing that I will do is authentication. It is asking me to provide my email, phone, or Skype. When I provide this initial information, this is where I'm trying to authenticate. I'm trying to gain access to Microsoft Azure portal. So I type my credentials. These credentials, I say these credentials that I'm going to type here, they will be sent to the directory service, which is Entra in this case, for authentication. So Entra will basically receive these credentials in an encrypted format because this website uses SSL and TLS. This is a secure website. These credentials will be sent to Entra. Entra will then match these credentials with its database and confirm presence of these credentials. Whether username or password, anything is incorrect, I'll get an error, right? I mistype it, I intentionally type the wrong password. When I sign in, now the response from Entra will come. Entra will say that either the account name, login name, or password is incorrect. If you don't remember, you will get an option to sign in now, right? So I'll type the right password now. Now, when I type the right credentials, this information is sent to Entra. Entra confirms that yes, this identity exists and this identity exists in the system, and Entra will allow me to sign in. Now, the moment I say yes, that yes, please sign me in, and it signs me in, this is where authorization happens. Based on the access that has been granted to my identity, I will get the UI. I will get actions to various services. So since UI is common to all the identities, the UI will be common. But if I have been granted read-only access, or if I don't have access on virtual machine service, when I click on this, it will say access denied. That's what authorization is. So once again, authentication is the process of challenging a person's software component, hardware device for credentials in order to verify their identity or prove that they are who or what they claim to be. So they are a legitimate user of the system, basically. That's what authentication is. Authentication typically requires the use of credentials, which is username, password, and whatnot, right? And then authorization validates that the user, machine, or software component has been granted access to certain resources. So in case of Azure, it will validate, the Entra service will validate whether the user has access to what level of RBAC has been granted to user. And based on that, that will be shown. So authorization is sometimes shortened to auth-Z, and this is known as auth-N. That's authentication and authorization. In one word, if you want to understand, authentication confirms users who they say they are. Whether you are a legitimate user, whether you maintain access to the system, that's authentication. Authorization is what level of access you maintain to the system. That's what authorization is. So authorization is always followed by authentication. Authorization cannot be done first and then authentication later. It is in the same process. First, you authenticate to a system, and then system authorizes your access to the resources on it. So that's authentication and authorization. Is everyone with me on this? Any question, any doubt that you may have on this concept? All right. So authentication versus authorization. Next, so they are just giving you an example of authentication versus authorization. Next is, what is an identity provider? What is an identity provider? So an identity provider is responsible for or does provide, create, maintain, and manage identity information while offering authorization or authentication of that authorization and auditing service. That's what an identity provider is. So in our case, guys, who is the identity provider? I say, which identity provider are we actually going to study about? Romil, are you there in the call? I don't see Romil. Okay. Weber, which identity provider are we going to study now? Or give me an example of an identity provider. It seems that he's not there. Suraj, are you there?
Yes, Rabbi.
Yes. Weber, which identity provider are we going to study about? So give me an example of an identity provider.
Azure AD.
Absolutely. Great. Which is now Entra ID. So we will not use Azure AD anymore. We'll just go with the technology. We'll keep our knowledge up to date. So it is Microsoft Entra ID. That is what we are going to study about. You can see Microsoft Entra ID does the same thing. It basically allows you to create users and groups. It allows you to maintain their life cycle. It allows you to manage their information. And it also manage their information basically means grant them access. And then when those users try to sign in, it also offers authentication and authorization. And you also have auditing capabilities. So in Entra ID, you have auditing capabilities also, wherein you can audit logs. So under monitoring, you see these audit logs. So here you can do some audits. You can download some reports. You can create some logic and get some information. So that's what an identity provider is. That's what that documentation basically talks about. That identity provider. It says Microsoft Entra is an example of a cloud-based identity provider. Other examples include Twitter, Google, Amazon, LinkedIn, GitHub. Because all of these websites, they require access. They basically require authentication and authorization. Right? Now, it basically brings a great point, which is integration. Today, most of the identity provider, they support integration. Integration basically means that you can have an identity with a different provider and that identity can authenticate to a system or a service at a different provider. For example, I'll give you the live example of it and demo of it. For example, LinkedIn. I have not created a separate credentials for LinkedIn. I use my Google identity to authenticate to LinkedIn. So Google and LinkedIn, they are integrated. They support integration. It is like I have a bank account with Standard State Bank of India. I carry a debit card and then walk into an ATM of ICICI Bank. which is a different bank altogether. They have two separate identity providers. And I can transact money. And ICICI Bank can even allows me to transact money. That even shows me my name, my account information, in fact, my account balance also. How is that possible? That is possible through integration. Integration between identity providers. And that's exactly what we are going to study in this training also, the integration concepts in Azure. So how they integrate with identity provider. By the way, see the live example of it. So if I want to log into LinkedIn, I don't need to provide my login credentials. I can log in using my Gmail. So when I say sign in, you can see I'm already getting signed in, signing you in, and it is signing me in using Gmail. So I have Gmail or Google Identity Service configured to authenticate and authorize me to LinkedIn. Why did I do that? So that I don't have to remember additional credentials for LinkedIn. Otherwise, life has become so complex in this digital world that we have a digital presence almost everywhere on every system that requires authentication and authorization. So to ease my life or to not maintain those many credentials, I use integration. So I use integration a lot. Now, this also has a potential risk of getting my Google account compromised. If my Google account is compromised, I would have 10 additional systems compromised. My account on 10 additional systems compromised. If my Google account is compromised, I will have my Facebook account compromised, my social networking compromised, my professional networking compromised, and I will also have some additional accounts compromised. So there is a risk here also. But to minimize that risk, I have enabled MFA, second factor authentication, which you did not see getting triggered because it triggers once, and then there is an option to remember the device. So I trusted this device, this laptop. That's the reason it did not trigger again, unless I remove the cookie from my browser history. In my browser, in this Chrome browser, there is a cookie which is maintaining that information. If I just delete the history, then signing to LinkedIn once again, it will also throw an additional factor authentication, which is an authentication app in my mobile that would share a code that needs to be put. So this is how I'm trying to. So A, I understand the risk. B, I have a solution to mitigate that risk, to contain and control that risk. I cannot completely remove it. That's not possible. Security is all about management of risk, not removing them. Nobody can remove the risk. No security can be 100%. So that's the example of identity federation that you've just seen. I will show you this example with the help of cloud service providers. Okay, so that's what identity federation is all about, that you are aware. So Microsoft Entra is an example of an identity provider, which is basically which is a cloud-based identity provider, which has the capability of doing authentication and authorization, auditing and creation and maintenance of accounts. So that's what we are going to study. Okay, so we're going to study about Microsoft Entra. Let's talk about Microsoft Entra fundamentals. Now, before we talk about Microsoft Entra fundamentals, first we need to do this exercise in the session itself, wherein I need to help you with gaining access trial license of Entra Premium P2 because Microsoft has changed the process. Earlier, when you would need a license of Microsoft products, it was directly available from the portal. But with September 1st, it was announced that license will need to be taken and assigned from admin portal, which is Microsoft 365 portal, and there will be a separate workflow that you will follow. So if you see here, let me log into another product. All right. So I'm logged into my my Azure portal using a different account. Is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes, Raghuveer.
Okay. In this tenant, I am also sailing in the same boat. I also have Microsoft Entra free license, which is the same case with you. So if I want to purchase, if I want to subscribe to a trial of P2, P2 is what we need for this training that you have seen from the licensing view. If I want to subscribe to P2, then what do I need to do? Right? There are multiple ways to go through it, multiple ways to get the P2 part. So over here itself, I have an option that says licenses. Under manage, it says licenses. I click on license, and here I have an option to get a free trial. I can get a free trial license, right? Now, this is so I can click on get a free trial and it shows me the licenses which are available. So Microsoft Entra Suite is available, the one that goes for $12. Microsoft Entra Governance license is available, the one which was separate license, especially made for standalone license governance part. And then we have Microsoft Entra P2. This is what we need. Microsoft Entra ID P2 license. So how can I take this license? I can click on free trial and I can activate it. Now, until last month, you would just click on activate. It will be activated for 1 month. You will have up to 100 users included in the license. So it says the trial license includes 100 licenses, 100 user licenses, and will be active for 30 days beginning on the activation date. I'm activating it on 16th of November. It will be valid till 16th of October. If I wish to upgrade to a paid version, I will need to purchase Microsoft Entra P2 by providing my payment information, by providing my billing and my tax information. If I have any GST number, that information, my business information, and I can do it, right? So this is what would happen until the beginning of September and until last week also, because they did they did declare a date, but sometimes it takes time for things to get 100% implemented. But what I experienced over the past weekend, that when you click on activate now, it is basically redirecting you to a workflow wherein you will need to provide some basic information to qualify or to get P2 license. It will ask you for certain information. And since the license is now available through admin portal, you will not be able to purchase it using the same account admin credentials. See, this is my account admin credentials with which I signed in. So if I type my account admin credentials here, which is the same credentials, it will not accept them. It says, let's get you started. I will say, yeah, please go ahead and set up my account. I will provide this information, and in the end, it will not accept. I know because it has happened already. So I'll provide my information. And in the end, it will say, no, you cannot sign up with a personal email account. This is a personal email account with which I'm signing. So two things have changed. First, it needs a Microsoft ID to sign in. Second, it needs your payment method. And Microsoft will deduct ₹2 from your payment method to validate that you are a legitimate user, that you are a legitimate citizen of that country. It will ask you for your tax ID, which is PAN number. However, Microsoft will not charge you at any point in time. After 30 days of expiry of the trial period, you will continue to receive follow-up emails from Microsoft in the registered email account. And once that 30-day period expires, your account will be disabled. Your license will be disabled, right? And in order to activate those licenses once again, or the license once again, you will need to upgrade the plan to a paid plan. And once you upgrade it to the paid plan, then from the subsequent month onwards, you will be charged on your payment method, whichever you add. So that is what has changed in the last couple of days. So keeping that in consideration, we will need to get you trial license. So Farhan will help you with this process. I've been talking at a stretch for the last few hours. I'm a bit tired now. So I will have Farhan to help you with this step. Farhan will help you with the process of subscribing to Microsoft Entra ID P2 trial license so that we can continue with the remainder of activities in the session. Is everyone with me on this? Subscribing to Microsoft Entra ID P2 trial license, which is very much needed today because after you acquire the license, it takes up to 24 hours in the backend to have that information updated and to have you access to all the features which are part of that license. Since we will be starting with those activities first thing from tomorrow onwards with activities that require P2 license, I want that to be active, to be subscribed, and it should be active today itself so that by tomorrow it will be in place. Okay. Screen visibility on.
Yes.
Yeah. Paste your password also. Now, those of you who are using a company laptop, Raghuveer sir told you to create a new member user, so that you can log in onto the Azure portal. So, those who are having a member user, they do not have to do this process of creating a new user first. So, those who are using a personal laptop, they have to create a new user into the Microsoft Entra ID, new member user first. First, create a new user. Who's member user. Add a role of global admin, global administrator. This role. Let this role on review plus create. Click on create now. Member user will be created now. So now, as the member user has been created, go to Microsoft Entra ID, click on manage, and now navigate to licenses. Click on licenses, click on get a free trial. You will see Microsoft Entra Suite, Microsoft Entra ID Governance, and Microsoft Entra ID P2. Click on Free Trial and click on Activate. Login here with the user member that we have created in Microsoft Entra. Andy? All right. So guys, you will not be able to use your email address, personal email account here for subscribing to P2 trial. Hence, you need to create a member user in your account in Entra ID with your default domain, and with that member user, with global admin rights granted to that member user, will be able to subscribe to P2 trial, Entra ID P2 trial. That's exactly what we are doing. We've created one member user for WebHub, and now we are signing in with that member user, authenticating with that member user. Now it will take us to the next page where we can go ahead for a trial. So this is a change in the process that was recently done. Okay. Is everyone done with that part? So those who have been using their TCS laptop to log into Azure portal, they already have this member user created with admin rights assigned to it. So they can directly use the member user details to come to the screen. Those who are using personal laptops, they never required a member user. So they need to create a member user first with Google admin rights assigned to that member user. And then they need to click on subscribe to trial, which would ask them to authenticate with that member user. And once the authentication is done, they would reach to the screen where it would ask you to add two pieces of information. One is your tax ID. Tax ID is nothing but your PAN card number. And second is your bill and payment method. You need to add your debit or credit card, which is in India and so registered in India, which is valid for online payment. Microsoft will deduct ₹2 from your card, will reimburse it back to you the very next moment. This is to authenticate that you are a legitimate citizen of India with valid payment method. However, Microsoft will never ever charge your card unless you manually upgrade this trial license to a paid version by providing your consent in the admin portal. So please proceed with this process. All of you follow the same process. On licenses, and the billing section, you will see licenses. Click on it. Yes. So you basically need to go to billing and payment. Yeah. Bills and payment. Payment method. Here add your payment. Give control to Weber. Let it fill in all the information. This is the page you need to fill in the information. You can also. Now on this laptop, please log into Microsoft Azure portal. Now all the participants Just listen carefully and see what he's doing. You need to follow the same process. You need to log into Microsoft Azure portal with a member account that has global admin rights. Skip that option. Okay. Now the question, log in with the credentials that Farhan has shared. So not this one. This will not work. You can skip. Okay, great. Now let's navigate to Entra ID. So guys, after you log in with the member account, you need to navigate to Entra ID. Entra ID service. From search, you can navigate to it. Yeah. Navigate to Entra ID. In the Entra ID under manage, your left you see manage. Under manage, scroll it down and navigate to licenses. License. And now here, click on get a free trial. Scroll it down, go to the end, and click on Microsoft Entra ID P2 free trial. Yep. Click on activate. Now this will redirect you to a different page. Wait, click on continue. So you're already signed in with this account, which is allowed. It's a Microsoft account. Okay. So you will get information required option here. It basically says that we are okay to give you a free trial. In the backend, you can see it says 100 licenses are available to try now, but they will need some basic information from you. What they need is your valid sold to address, registration number, your billing account. Sold to address basically means your address on which they will bill you. I'm saying future if you decide to continue with this free trial and upgrade it to a paid account, paid license, then definitely they will need to send you digital bills or physical bills. So that information they need. Click on continue. It will automatically take you to that place where you need to fill in the information, right? This is where you need to fill the information, right? First click on edit and type your sold to address. Edit. And here you need to type your address. Now you need to provide your complete address where you have your card registered. Remember, in the next screen, you will add a payment method. So wheresoever you get your credit or debit card statement, your, where your bank has registered you, please provide that information. And if you're using somebody else's card, then you need to provide their information. Right? So please provide the information. You need to provide address line 1, which is mandatory. No, that's not how it is, Weber. Weber, you're getting a free trial from Microsoft for a product for which Microsoft needs your information. You need to provide accurate information. This address
okay.
must.
Okay, yeah.
Weber, are you listening to me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So please provide your home address. And say if you are, if you don't want to share it on a recorded session, you can stop sharing. But the information that you will provide has to be correct. Microsoft will validate this information. Okay. Okay. Add a payment method now. Are you done with
Yes,
adding payment method?
yes.
Okay, no worries. Once you add the payment method, it takes a couple of minutes to show it here, but that's okay. In the backend, it is there. Now, go back to the other tab, the second tab on the screen. On the top, you have tabs, browser tabs. Yeah, this tab. Now click on this tab once again, activate. Activate to your right. Now it will automatically pick up all the information. Next, continue. And whatever information is with Microsoft, it will just synchronize it real quick. Continue. And this time it will go through. Payment method. It doesn't show a payment method.
I think yeah, require credit card. I think so.
Oh, debit card also works. I've seen debit card working a number of times. They've just changed the option, as I said. Microsoft is very notorious to change things here and there all the time. So you don't have a debit card, Weber?
Oh, yes.
You
What?
don't have a credit card, Weber?
No.
Get one for yourself, man. These days, even college going to accept credit cards. Okay, no worries. We'll see what we can do in this case. Okay. Any other participant who is facing the same issue?
Even I don't have the credit card with me. So if any debit card for a specific bank will work, where you can provide the bank details. Any bank.
Yeah, the debit
will
card
the-
works here. I don't know why it says
Oh.
credit card.
Okay, okay. Then I'll try with that.
Because we can't show credit card details to now automatically. Add debit card. Debit card also works. In fact, on my account, the one that you
Okay.
see, I only have my debit card added. No credit card I've added. So I'll show
Okay,
you.
I'll try with the debit card then.
I will also try once again, Raghuveer.
Yeah, please do that.
Free trial.
Okay.
To our payment history, payment details.
After 30 days of free trial is over,
Mhm.
your license will get disabled. This
Okay.
trial will get disabled. Microsoft will send you an email, multiple emails, reminder emails, starting from 20 days that your trial is expiring. Please upgrade it to paid subscription. Right. So Microsoft will keep sending you communication. If you don't
Okay.
upgrade it to paid, then automatically Microsoft will disable, will delete the license and will delete your payment method and will delete this account.
Okay.
Same is the case with Azure sponsorship pass. The subscription that you have. After 30 days, it will get disabled. You will have an option to convert it to paid subscription, pay as you go. If you don't convert it, then Microsoft will also first delete all the data, then disable it, and then delete it. So in any case, Microsoft will not charge from your payment method. Microsoft never does that, and it's not possible unless you yourself convert this to a paid subscription, to a paid account. And for that, you need to once again authenticate your payment method by providing the one-time password and other information.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
So is my screen shared, Aditya? Aditya, you can now log in. I'll open. So log in with your Outlook email address first, and then you create a member user like Entra admin user. And with that Entra admin user, you can log into your TCS laptop. Aditya, you have access now.